What's up everyone, Adam from Cape Crawlers, and this is the 1-inch mid-size tire shootout. Now I've done a couple shootouts on bigger size tires, but now it's time to focus on the mid-size tires, and that's what we're going to do today. We've got 4 tires that we're going to take a look at today that I've picked from a number of excellent tires out there, but we've whittled it down to 4 contestants today. And these are all in the 57mm range. They're going to work great on a stock SCX24, a stock TRX4M, anything that runs a 1-inch wheel can benefit from these with very, very little modifications, if any modifications, to the body or chassis to make them fit. So how we're going to do this, we're going to look at these tires individually, we're going to compare them to some stock tires, and then we're going to put them in a number of performance-focused situations. I'm going to expand the performance a little more this time to encompass a broader range of terrain and challenges. Then I'm going to score these based on the results of the performance tests and also value for money. In the end, I'll tally up all the scores in the hopes that the objective measurements can give us a clear winner. So with that, let's jump in and take a look at our competitors. Let's meet our competitors here. The field was very competitive, I gotta say, so narrowing this down to 4 tires in this segment was pretty tough. We do have some honorable mentions, which I'll get into in a minute, but these are the 4 that I selected for our comparison here. So we have the RC 4-wheel drive Goodyear Wranglers, the Proline Trenchers, the Injora 57mm Rock Terrains, and the Little Guy Racing Parts 57mm Swamp Kings. For our honorable mentions, let's take a look at our honorable mentions here. The 56mm Injora Rock Terrains, this is a great tire. If you watch my SCX24 budget build, I featured those on that build and it worked excellent. This is a great tire, but I opted to let the new Rock Terrains represent Injora in the competition. Honorable mention number 2, the Proline Super Swampers. Now Proline came out with 3 new tires this year in the 1-inch segment, which is amazing because Proline tires are great. So I had to pick one of them and I opted to let the Trenchers be the Proline representative. Speaking of Proline, honorable mention number 3 is the Baja Pro X. This is a great scale tire from Proline, licensed by Mickey Thompson. Incredible scale detail here. The reason why I didn't feature these was because we have the Little Guy Racing Parts Swamp Kings, which have a very, very similar tread design. And our 4th honorable mention here is the good old Milestar Patagonias from RC 4-wheel drive. This is a smaller tire, but an incredible performer. But again, I wanted just one representative of RC 4-wheel drive and ended up going with the Goodyear Wranglers. So let's kick this off. Let's look at these tires one by one. Let's start with the Little Guy Racing Parts 57mm Swamp Kings. These are the brand new Swamp Kings released by Little Guy Racing Parts, just released last week at the time of this recording. This is a 57 by 22mm tire. Price is $19.99 for the set of 4. This comes in the NL2 competition rubber that we're used to, the same compound that's used in the Swamp Kings, the big Swamp Kings, the new Trench Kings. So this is the great compound that we're familiar with all of Little Guy Racing Parts tires. It's virtually identical to the big Swamp Kings, has this very aggressive tread pattern, lots of gnarly sidewall grip here, a kind of squared off profile on this tire, directional tire with lots of room in between these lugs to clear out sand and mud and debris. So excellent new tire from Little Guy Racing Parts. Next up, let's take a look at the Injora 57mm Rock Terrain. Now the 64mm Rock Terrains are available from Injora. These are essentially a scaled down version of that, virtually identical except for the overall size. These are also a 57 by 22mm, although they do appear wider. Could be because of the profile on these. These are very squared off, flat on the top with these sharp edges along the sidewall. Very reminiscent of a Proline Hyrax, but bigger than the Hyrax in the 1-inch size. These are $16 for a set of 4, and they come in the very sticky S5 compound. And I can tell you they feel very, very grippy. It's worth noting that these are the only tires that are brand new. The other tires in this shootout have been run for a decent amount of time, but the Injoras are fresh out of the bag, so we got to keep that in mind while we're testing these. Next up is the Proline Trencher in the 1-inch size. The Proline Trenchers are another 57 by 22mm tire. price on these is $26.99. They are a more expensive tire because you are strong-armed into getting the plastic beadlock wheels that come with these tires. We will not be using the plastic beadlock wheels, so I've taken them out here, but that is one reason why they are more expensive than the rest. These are offered in Proline's super soft compound. They are also very soft and sticky, and these are a copy, nearly identical to the larger sized Proline trenchers that are available in the 1.9 and bigger sizes. Great to see these in the 1-inch size this year from Proline. And finally, we have the RC 4-wheel drive Goodyear Wrangler. This is a licensed Goodyear tire, excellent scale replica of the real thing. These are a smaller tire. This is a 54 by 20 millimeter tire. Price on these is $19.98 for a set of 4. You do have to buy them in sets of 2, but the 2 combined to get a set of 4 is right around $20. So $19.98 for the 2. This is in RC 4-wheel drive's advanced X2S3 compound, which is again very soft and sticky. And like the Swamp Kings, they do have these kind of deep grooves in them to clear out the debris. They've also got this aggressive sidewall design for improved grip. You may notice that these are vented tires because I run them on my SCX24 Bronco and I had them vented at that time. But we're going to be running these all unvented wheels, so it should level the playing field. Comparing the Swamp Kings to some stock tires here. So let's take a look at how these stack up against some stock tires. So I've got a stock BFG from the TRX4M, and I've got a stock Nitto Trail Grappler from an SCX24. So this will give us some perspective looking at these against stock tires. Now the Swamp King, very similar height to the BFGs, although a little more narrow. It is both taller and wider than the SCX24 stock tire than the Nitto. Comparing the Injora 57mm rock terrain to the stock BFG and the stock Nittos, the Injora is virtually identical to the BFG. It appears to be just slightly taller, but the width and overall footprint is nearly identical. It is, again, much wider and taller than the stock Nitto from the SCX24. Looking at the Proline trencher against the stock BFG and the stock Nitto, the trencher has a more rounded profile. It's taller in the center and then slopes off to the side, so it's got a rounded edge, making it look smaller than the BFG, although it is slightly taller, I would say, very minimally taller. All of these 57mm tires are all going to be very similar in size to the BFGs. The Proline is narrower than the BFG, again, slightly wider than the Nitto from the SCX24, definitely taller though. Looking at the RC 4-wheel drive, the Goodyear Wrangler against the BFG and the Nitto, here we can see that the Goodyear Wrangler is smaller, both in terms of height and width, than the BFG. It is very comparable to the stock Nitto Trail Grappler from the SCX24. Slightly taller, I would say, but very, very close in terms of overall dimensions. So now that we've met our competitors, here's how the next part of this video is going to work. I'm going to mount all of these up to individual sets of wheels. Now I'm going to be using the Little Guy Racing Parts beadlock wheels for this because I've amassed enough of these wheels that I can mount all 4 of these tires on individual sets of their beadlocks. Plus I'm able to equate the weight, the venting features, and the offset in each one of these wheels. So we'll have a very good baseline for a wheel choice here for all of these tires. For our testing rig, we're going to be using our new TRX4M Bronco because I feel like the 57mm tire is perfect on this rig since it's mostly stock. Then we're going to take these out to the backyard and we're going to hit our crawler course. I've set up a bunch of challenge lines on the rock course. I've also set up some other testing areas. We're going to put these tires through their paces. Once we've run each 4 of these tires through each section, we'll come back inside and we'll score them based on the results. I'll tally up all the scores and we'll check it out to see where we end up. So now let's get to the fun stuff. Let's go hit the course and check these things out in action. Welcome to the proving grounds, my friends. Check this out. So here's our rock crawler course. We're going to set up some challenge lines, probably 2 or 3 challenge lines, some of my favorite sections through here. We're going to come over here and do some vertical testing. I have grip tape, but I'm going to try to use these slick sections in between because I want to get a sense for how these things grip on an inclined slick surface. Over here we're going to do the side hill. Same thing, we've got this kind of slick plywood. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do a side hill, kind of a wall ride on this. I think this is about 36 degrees. Next, we're going to come over here. We're going to do a sand course. This is one of the things that I often neglect, is that loose, fine terrain to really test the mud and sand tires. So we're going to do a little bit of maybe a figure 8 or just an oval through the sand. And these are going to be our performance tests. It's got a brand new battery ready to go in the Bronco. We're going to kick it off with the stock tires to get a baseline. So let's get after it. Alright guys, I'm going to jump in and out here with some voiceover. Just do some minor commentary. Not going to talk over the whole thing. These are the initial runs with the stock BFGs on the Bronco. I'm going to do the stock tires on each one of these obstacles and challenges just to give you a perspective on the new tires. The Swamp Kings did really good on the vertical. Started to get some lift here. It actually goes out of camera, but it was doing the torque twist. That front driver's side tire lifted way up, but got real far. Next up are the Injoras. Now these were fresh out of the bag when I installed them, so I did drive them around to try and get them dirty and then run them through the grass to try to simulate some activity on these things, but still they were super grippy. I expected these to be really, really good on this slick vertical, and they did not disappoint.
Well, can I have a fly?
Yeah, can I just finish this? At this point my little buddy came out, so you'll probably hear him in the background through the rest of this. Next up were the Goodyear Wranglers. Now, although a smaller tire, these are really, really grippy and soft, so I had high hopes for these on these initial tests, but started to get some front end lift right away, really early on this with the Wranglers. This is about as far as it can go. Still beat stock, but less capable than I was hoping.
That's all we got right there.
Now the Proline trenchers put on a clinic here for the vertical test. These things climbed like this plank was on flat ground. Barely got any front end lift until the vehicle was out of the camera, and even continued to climb up the vinyl fence when it was out of range. These little guy racing parts, Swamp Kings, really did excellent on the side hill. They gripped extremely well and got situated right off the bat, and then held a line with no problem. They could have kept going on for many, many more feet on this plank. Now the Injuras here I expected to do a little bit better. They seem to slip right off the bat. You can see the back end kicking out there. They are wider and more of a square edge tire than the other ones, which is why I was expecting them to grip really well. I think the super soft compound and soft foams might have hurt them here though.
I know which one's my favorite. This one.
The Goodyear Wranglers, after a somewhat disappointing run on the vertical, surprised me here in a good way with a lot of grip and a lot of stability on the side hill. These seem to get situated pretty quickly and stuck their line really, really well. Like the Swamp Kings, I think these things could have kept going and going and going. Really had no issues there at all once they got their footing. The trenchers seemed to have a little bit of a trouble getting situated, but once they got planted, they stuck really well here. On the way back, I got them situated earlier, and they stuck and held their line really well across the plank here. Now the sand pit here I had high hopes for, but the TRX4M turned out to be a little too big to have a really functional course run in here. So I ended up just trying to do some oval runs around the outside of the wheelbarrow. It was a little clunky and not super productive, but I hope this at least gives you a sense of how these tires will work in a loose, sandy, potentially muddy situation. One of the things I'm paying close attention to in this test is how the tires clean out and how packed they get with sand. As you can see, these stock tires here are really caked with sand and they're not clearing out very well. Of all the tires in our test, the Swamp Kings were best prepared for the sand pit. The lug design and the deep grooves in the tread really work well in the loose situations like this. The gnarly, sharp-edged pieces of rock that I stuck in there really hung up the truck in every test here. The undercarriage of the Bronco just kept getting snagged up on those sharp edges. There was really no way around it. Now the Injuras went off to a really good start. They gripped really well right off the bat and really took me by surprise how well they gripped in the sand and in the loose conditions. But as you'll see later in the test, they do not clean out very well at all and really started to hamper performance quickly. It's difficult to really tell from the footage, maybe not, you can kind of see it there, but these things got so caked with sand, they were like hard-packed slicks. And when I took it out of the wheelbarrow, I had to really struggle to clean them out by hand, almost having to get a brush to clean the sand out of the tires. You can see the big clumps of sand stuck in the lugs of these things. They do not clean out whatsoever, and it was really difficult to get them ready for the next obstacle after this test.
I did the first two.
Good.
I did both. The devil did easy on both. The devil is easy. I'm just literally testing tires again. I'm testing tires. I'm testing these tires. And they're doing off the really good. Do I need to help?
Next up were the Goodyear Wranglers. These actually did pretty well. These, like the Swamp Kings, have those deep grooves in the tire that allow them to clean out pretty well. It's an interesting tread design on these tires, but it did work pretty well in the sand. Where it did struggle was just due to ground clearance. Again, the chassis of the Bronco was just getting hung up all over the place because these tires are just small. So it just does not give the Bronco the ground clearance it needed to get up and over these obstacles as well as some of the other tires did. Overall, for a smaller tire though, I was impressed at how well these did carrying the big Bronco around in the sand. I had relatively low expectations for the trenchers in the sand, only because I have the 1.9 inch trenchers for my UTB 18 Capra, and they are miserable in the sand and in loose terrain. They just do not clean out whatsoever on that rig, and I really struggle with them. But these trenchers in the 1 inch size seem to work really well. They hooked up decent and managed to clean out and not get caked with sand like the Injuras did. So I was actually pleasantly surprised at how well the trenchers did in this type of terrain. This section right here is a good indication of how well they did. No other truck was able to get up and around that sharp-edged obstacle, kind of up over the wall of the wheelbarrow, but the trenchers made it possible. Getting into the rock crawling now, I set up 4 challenge lines here on the rock course. Some of my favorite lines that I really like to use on this course for challenging and for filming. So it's a good combination of vertical climbs, both on jagged rock and slick rock, and really tests the tire capability in a lot of different areas. Kicking it off with the Swamp Kings here. The Swamp Kings impressed me with their versatility. They are certainly more of a mud terrain type tire, but their performance on rocks I find just really interesting because they just grab and do really well, surprisingly well. Lost a gate there, but still managed to get up and over that initial gatekeeper. This is a tricky off-camber spot with a hard breakover, and the tires were able to get that rig up and over it really clean. These Injora rock terrains I had really high hopes for because I've really enjoyed the bigger 64mm versions of these, which hook up amazing on the rocks. So I was expecting really good performance from these tires. This section here seemed to really give the Bronco fits with these tires on it. With a hard bump, I'm able to get up and over though. Right off the bat, I found myself having to be more strategic with my line choice with the Goodyear Wranglers. The size diminishes the approach angle, which was already hampered by that big bumper on the Bronco, but these smaller tires really make it more challenging. So I had to really be thoughtful about my line choice and get this thing lined up appropriately. Once these things grip, they do grip hard, and they're able to yank the Bronco up and over lines. For a smaller tire, I was really impressed they were able to get up over that gnarly section there pretty easily. The trenchers grip really well on the rocks. They're able to hook up, pull the Bronco up really easy. You can see here I dial it back to get around that gate, but don't lose any traction on that steep face. Just keeps a good grip, and I'm able to reposition myself in the middle of that steep obstacle. Pretty impressive. Definitely had some significant challenges getting up and over this tight technical section, but finally able to get some good grip and get it up and over. Challenge line 2 is basically a reversal of our first challenge line, except there's this jagged rock face to get up and over as the gatekeeper. This is really challenging just due to the shape and size. It's really easy to get high centered here. You need a tire with really good grip to pull you over. And it's tough because that rock is flat on the top. So it's a really challenging obstacle in the beginning here. Had a little bit of a challenge getting started here with the Swamp Kings. It was hard to find a line to get up and over this gatekeeper. Eventually I got these things to bite and was able to get up and over. From there it was fairly smooth sailing. There's a big gap on the other side of that flat landscaping brick that was hanging the rig up a little bit, but still able to reposition and bump up and over that obstacle to finish strong. Coming up to the approach on this obstacle, I feel like the Injoras might have had an advantage because of their width and the squared off profile. Was able to catch the sidewall on that obstacle and get us up and over the gatekeeper a lot easier than the other tires. From there, like I said, they've gotten that little hole on the other side, but still able to recover for a good clean run. As the challenge lines began to get more aggressive and technical, the Goodyear Wranglers really began to struggle. As you can imagine, this gatekeeper here, a smaller tire, is going to hurt it from lack of clearance and also lack of approach angle, and we really ran into trouble here with the Wranglers. I eventually had to opt for a bypass here to go around the gate and get some sort of start on this obstacle. But once going, again, the Wranglers hook up really well. It's just getting up and over some of those more challenging technical obstacles that favor the bigger tires. Now the trenchers seem to have a little bit of a rough time getting going here. Was able to pop up and over the gatekeeper here, but had a lot of trouble getting up and over this sharp edge. This is where some extra wheel speed from those crawler gears could really help out, but we gotta work with what we got. Eventually these things bit. I was able to get up and over. Did blow a gate there though. Once over the gatekeeper, it was pretty smooth sailing for the trenchers. as we get past this little pitfall here. Now this challenge line is an interesting one, and it revealed a flaw in the stock setup that I want you to pay attention to as we get up and going here. Now these stock tires are not glued in the bead locks, and what you'll see, if you saw that, was the wheels spinning inside the tires.
Spinning inside the rim.
I experienced that a couple of times, and I thought for a moment I'd broken an axle. But after looking more closely, I could see that it was just the wheels spinning inside the tire. Swamp Kings get off to a good start here, but this challenge line is deceptively difficult. This section right here is very, very challenging. It's an off-camber, real sharp-edged approach on that landscaping brick, and the loose rock there at the base makes it really difficult. The Swamp Kings get it done, but we had to blow a gate there to get up and over on that more flat spot in order to reposition and make it through the rest of the line. Like the Swamp Kings, the Injuras get off to a good start here, but they run into trouble early around this left-hand turn leading into the really tight and technical sections. This line really exposed the same issue I'd mentioned earlier about the Injuras, in that they may be too soft. I love a soft, sticky tire, and these are both, but I feel like the soft compound and the soft foams in particular hurt the Injuras a little bit here, because the tires would fold over on themselves and slip and slide as a result. You can see the back end kind of kicking out there. Able to get through this line just based on sheer muscle and determination, but really struggled there in the beginning. This was another line that really gave the Goodyear Wranglers fits. This gatekeeper here leading into that uphill left-hand corner just really
Yes, I'll be
put
right
these
there.
things to the test. It was a struggle to get up and through here. And as you can see, we were here for a minute. This is another case where extra wheel speed from the Bronco could have really helped, because once we're up and over that gatekeeper, these tires hook up really well. It was just a real struggle to get up through there and into this technical section. This line really showcases how good the trenchers do on the rocks, able to get up and through that gatekeeper and around that corner with no drama. Coming into this really technical section that gave the other trucks fits, the trenchers were able to hook up and get through here pretty clean, actually. This last line here is a bit of a bonus. It's a pretty advanced line. There's this very aggressive near vertical breakover here. That's a really good test for grippy tires, because once you get your tires up and over, if you've got a tire that can grip right there, it makes for a really dramatic entry to this obstacle. The stock tires gave it a good run, but in the end, just didn't have the grip necessary to get up and over that gatekeeper. Now the aggressive lug design of the Swamp Kings here should do really well on this kind of sharp-edged rock. And they do. Once they get a good bite, these tires are able to pull the Bronco up and over. This is a tricky section here too, with that smooth off-camber rock right there. Easy to roll over, but the Swamp Kings stick and get us through to the end. This type of line and terrain is right up the Injora's alley here. The way these tires are designed, that soft compound and this lug design on these things and the wide footprint really make these a great choice for lines like these, although we do struggle a little bit here in the beginning. Once these find the line and get their bite though, it's up and over and smooth sailing through the rest, making swift work of the rest of this challenge line. Now the Goodyear Wranglers, as you can imagine, are at a disadvantage here just because of the size. They were able to get up and almost over, but it was a mighty struggle to get these things to bite hard enough to pull the Bronco up and over that line. We tried and tried. I even tried some different approaches, even tried to work a bypass, but just couldn't get the chassis to break up and over that sharp-edged obstacle. In the end, I just had to call it quits and throw in the towel for the Wranglers. Coming to the end here, we have the Proline trenchers. It was getting dark at this point, so I hope you can see the trenchers hook up extremely well here and are able to bite very hard right off the bat and just give a good yank of the Bronco up and over. Very impressive run with these tires, sticking the rest of the line with ease and getting through no problem. Now for the hard part, we got to make a decision here. Well, hopefully the numbers can make a decision for us. These are all great tires. They all performed very, very well. Super impressed with these. Every one of them excelled in one area or the other, but to me there was one standout, and I'm really interested to see if the numbers prove my theory right. So I've got my scoring sheet here. Now how my scoring is going to work here, we're going to score it like a game of golf. The lower you get, the better the placing. So if a tire scores the best in a category, it's going to get a number 1. If it scores the worst, it's going to get a 4. And the tire with the lowest number, when I tally all these up, is going to be the winner. Now I've got 5 categories here. I've got value, I've got the vertical climb, I've got the side hill, the sand section, and the rock course. So those are our criteria that we're going to be judging by. First up, value. Let's take a look. So I don't think it's any surprise here that Injora takes the cake when it comes to value. They are the low-cost leader when it comes to tires, for sure. And they've been doing really, really well lately because the quality of their tires keeps going up, but their price remains low. So Injora scores number 1 in this section. RC 4-wheel drive gets 2 here because although they were very, very close to the 3rd spot, I did find them $1 cheaper on other websites other than RC 4-wheel drive, which got them pretty close to the Injora. So RC 4-wheel drive gets 2 here. The Swamp Kings get 3, and the Trenchers get 4 because they are the most expensive because you're strong-armed into getting those plastic beadlock wheels. Hint, hint, Proline, we don't want the plastic wheels. Next up, vertical climbing. The Trenchers dominated the vertical climb. They went so high it wasn't even on camera. It went all the way up to the very top of the plank and climbed about 6 inches vertically up my vinyl fence. So they were the clear standout winner in the vertical climb. Second place went to Injora, the 57mm rock terrains. Third went to the Swamp Kings, and 4th went to RC 4-wheel drive. Next up was side hilling. The Swamp Kings took the side hilling. They could have stuck to that. If that plank had gone another 20 feet, those things were not going to move, and it would have gone even steeper for sure. That thing just cruised flat as a pancake across the side hill with the Swamp Kings on it. Second place was close, but I gave the nod to RC 4-wheel drive, the Goodyear Wranglers. They seemed to get situated earlier and stick better than the third place, which was the Proline trenchers. The trenchers seemed to take a little bit longer to get sorted out on the side hill. Once they were there, they stuck pretty well, but it was just a little more tricky to get there than the Goodyear Wranglers were. Fourth place in the side hill went to the Injora rock terrains. They really seemed to struggle on the side hill. That S5 compound and the really soft foams that come in these tires hurt them on the side hill, I think, because it just seemed to slide and fold over a little bit. They just had a hard time there. In the sand, now the sand pit was tough to judge because I really needed a bigger space. The TRX4M was really too big for that wheelbarrow course. So I looked at sand in a couple different ways. I looked at how the rig performed in the sand, but also how the tires cleaned out after I took them out of the sand. So that weighed on my judging pretty heavily here. With that said, first place in the sand, I'm going to give it to the Swamp Kings. I don't think there's any surprise there based on the lug pattern and the tire design. They were able to clean out exceptionally well, and it got decent traction throughout the wheelbarrow. Second place, surprisingly, I'm going to give to the trenchers. Now, I have the bigger trenchers on my UTB18 Capra, and those do not clean out hardly at all in sand and mud and loose terrain. But the 1-inch ones surprisingly cleaned out really well, and I was surprised at how well it performed in the sand with the trenchers on it. There was that one line closest to the camera and to the left-hand side of the screen where you kind of go up and around that sharp-edged rock, and the trencher was the only tire that was able to get the Bronco up and around that one tricky spot. And when I took it out, they cleaned out really, really well. So I was very pleasantly surprised with the trenchers here, which is why they got second place. Third, I'm going to give it to the Goodyear Wranglers because they did clean out pretty well, and they also hooked up pretty well in there. Where they are a smaller tire, I think it got hurt a little bit because the Bronco was just digging down to the point where it overwhelmed the tires, I feel. Fourth place in the sand goes to the Injora rock terrains. They started off really good. I was initially very impressed by how they were doing in the sand. But once the lugs filled up with sand, it was all over. These things do not clean out at all. It took me a significant amount of time to manually clean them out once I took it out of the wheelbarrow. And that was the primary reason why I gave them fourth here. And finally, on the rocks, where it really matters for us rock crawlers, this was a tough one. I'm going to go backwards here because this is really kind of the deciding factor. So in fourth place, I gave it to the Goodyear Wranglers. And what really held these things back was, I think, just the overall size. It's a smaller tire, even smaller than the stock tire that comes on the TRX4M, and I think that really hurt it from an approach angle and ground clearance standpoint. The Wranglers just seemed to really struggle. A couple of spots it couldn't even make it through the gated lines, and I had to use bypasses or I had to abort the line altogether. Once these things hook up, though, they do hook up really, really well. I think you've just got to have the right rig to put them on, but they just didn't shine in this case here. In third place, I'm going to give it to the Injuras. I had really, really high hopes for the rock terrains. They are so sticky and grippy, and I have such great experience of them in the 64 millimeter size. I was really expecting these to be killers on the rock, but they just got outshined by the other tires, and they didn't hook up as I was hoping that they would. They'd still hooked up great, don't get me wrong. I'm not disappointed whatsoever with how they performed. Definitely a great tire on the rocks, but they just got outworked by the other two. In second place, and this was a tough one, I'm going to give it to the Swamp Kings. The Swamp Kings did really, really well on the rocks. They hook up great. They did excellent. They made it through all the lines, did blow a couple gates, but there was just a couple of sections where they really, really struggled to get going and had a hard time hooking up on some of the slicker areas. The more vertical and kind of smooth rock surfaces just seemed to make them work a little harder than they really wanted to. And it's not that the Swamp Kings were bad by any means, far from it. It's just that the Proline trenchers, which took first place, really, really jumped out in my mind as the clear performer on the rocks. They hooked up really, really well. They were the only tires to do some of the real technical lines on the challenge lines. Even though we did blow a couple gates in the process, they did hook up extremely well, surprisingly well on the rocks in nearly every situation, on the smooth rocks, on the jagged rocks, on the vertical, on the off camber. They just did exceptionally well on the rocks, and to me, they were the standout performer there. So now for our overall scoring here. Let's see. The Goodyear Wranglers coming in 4th place with 15 points. The Injora Rock Terrains 57mm coming in 3rd place with 14 points. The top 2, Trenchers and Swamp Kings. Who do you think's going to get it? You ready? We get the drum roll. 2nd place goes to the Swamp Kings with 12 points. And the Trencher takes the win by 1 point with 11. That's right in line with what I was thinking as I was driving the rig. The Trenchers really stood out to me as the best performer of the bunch. They just seemed to do everything really, really well. Even in the sand, which I really thought they would struggle with. The ability to clean out and continue on to other terrain is really important, and these things did a great job. The vertical climbing was outrageous. Head and shoulders above the rest on the vertical climbs. They really stuck to those slick surfaces on the plywood there. And on the rocks, like we just talked about, they did exceptionally well on the rocks. Well, all these tires are great. They have excellent compounds, great fit and finish, great scale look and appearance, perform much, much better than stock. All of them do. The Proline Trenchers were really the standout performers here. Now, I tried to keep that as objective as possible using my scoring model, but let's open this up for comments down below. Let me know your thoughts. Was I off base here? Would you have scored it differently? Who do you think's the clear winner in your mind? Let me know. I'm really anxious to hear from you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. These comparisons are a lot of fun. I wish I could open it up and do 20 or 30 tires at once here, because I think I could, because there are just that many excellent tires out there. So if you want a follow-up video, let me know in the comments down below as well what you would like to see in the next mid-size tire shootout. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out and watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you in the next one.